Mr. Henowitz, your employment record, other than your military service, has been primarily with the union that represents many government workers in the state. Do you think that your loyalty to your former employer would compromise your ability to look at the budget and pension issues as they affect state workers?
I don't think that it would at all. I've spent my life fighting for the things that I believe in, whether it's for my country or the unions, as you put it, the teachers and nurse union that I worked for, because I fought for the middle class. I fought for the people. And most recently, I actually worked for the Working Families Organization, trying to get through paid family medical leave. So I think that with my work history, it's all been about trying to fight for the things that I believe in. And I'm here today because I want to fight for the 20th District and fight for the people here.
Senator Formica can respond to that, but also your position, on should the opening of the contracts be under consideration to try to get the savings that may be necessary to get the fiscal house back in order, and you have up to 90 seconds.
Thank you. Well, we have called on our side of the aisle to have a vetting of all union contracts through the legislature. You saw what happened when the Yukon contract came forward, and there was a lot of discussion with regard to that. Certainly there are a number of union positions held in the legislature, paid union employees. Whether that represents a conflict of interest and whether they should recuse themselves, I don't know. I know this. We have to put Connecticut back to work. And we're not going to put Connecticut back to work as long as our fiscal policies remain the same. We need to work hard to manage our spending, manage our budget, pension reform. We need to, your question was open the contracts. That's the governor's job, not the legislature's job, but I certainly would encourage him to do that because right now the spending cap that we're operating under is non-existent, and they're taking a lot of those dollars and exempting them from the spending cap, which is actually going to pension debt. So there's a lot of things that we need to do to reform. It's not going to happen overnight. It took 30 years of one-party rule to get us to this point. It's going to take us some time to get us out. But the question is, can we have people in Hartford that are willing to work together, reach across the aisle, and have conversation in order to get some of these things done?
And I'd like to give Mr. Henowitz a minute because I'm going to kind of elaborate on the issue. Kind of two issues were raised. One, do you think that the legislature should be approving the labor contracts? Right now, they have the option of doing so. They very seldom do so. So should they always go to the legislature for action? Since and secondly, do you think the union should be willing to reopen the contracts, the benefits contracts, given the serious fiscal problems the state faces, to try to find some labor savings short of more layoffs? And I'll give a minute for Mr. Henowitz on the labor issue.
So now I believe that there's a couple different issues raised in there. So the first one was you raised the point, Paul, of should the unions be a part of reopening it, while my opponent, Paul, brought up the point of that the governor should open it. So I think that if we are saying that the governor should use that executive force and just have one party decide to break a contract, then I completely disagree with that. I think a contract is entered into by both parties, by both individuals. If they want to go back and look at it, that's one thing. The other part of the issue that was brought up was that it hasn't been 30 years of one-party rule, as we've had numerous Republican governors throughout this time period, one of which signed a 15-year state employee contract and helped create a lot of the mess that's going on. I also believe that what was done recently with laying off 1,000 of the lowest paid state employees was also the wrong way to go about this.
And I hope the senator will mind me just try to get an answer on the issue of whether the legislature should act on labor contracts, make that a requirement as opposed to now where it's optional.
I think that having the legislature vote on the labor contracts is unnecessary. I think that right now you already have the executive branch and the union sitting down to figure out the contract. So you already have the input going in on the issue. Once it's already agreed upon, I don't believe that's necessary for the legislature to actually approve of the contract that has already been approved by the executive branch.
All right, thank you. And I'll give you another 30 seconds to be fair, Mr. Formica, if you want to comment further on this issue.
Sure, thank you. I agree with Mr. Henowitz that a contract is a contract and need to be honored. As first selectman, I negotiated many union contracts, and without strong employees, work doesn't get done. But the fact of the matter is, in the state government, it is the governor's position to negotiate contracts, and I believe 14 or so he's in the process of negotiating now that expired on June 30th. So we need to do pension change, and just an example on voting on contracts. The Yukon contract in question at the committee level was voted 6-6 by the Senate, 24-18 by the House, and if it did not go to the legislature, it would have passed, even though a 6-6 vote would have indicated failure. So,
All right, I'll have to wrap it up there. I'll
Thank
thank
you.
our candidates.